Welcome to the Rise of the Challenge podcast. Join me today. He's an entrepreneur, the owner of Dark Horse Schooling and the Dark Horse Schooling podcast. It's Tracy Brinkmann. How are you doing today, Tracy?
I am doing excellent, Alex. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for joining us on the show and being ready to talk about your rise to the challenge.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
What we like to do first is we go straight to the beginning. Talk about where you're from and what were you involved in growing up?
Well, let's see where I'm from. That's an interesting question to answer because my dad was a 23-year veteran in the United States Army. So I'm from everywhere, born in Colorado, but we moved like every 2 or 3 years. So I lived all over the United States, pretty much the Midwest and the Western states the most. And then spent about 6 years of my childhood growing up in Germany as well. So I got to experience a little bit of everything that I think this world has to offer when it comes to people, personalities, creeds, religions, races, the whole 9 yards. So it was kind of cool. Things I was into. Obviously, I think one of the cool things about moving a lot is it taught me to develop the skill of connecting with folks. And I usually used humor to do that. So I developed a pretty, I'll call it a good sense of humor. Not everyone would agree, obviously. But then later on, I got into martial arts quite a bit, which taught me a lot of discipline and which probably went along with that military structure I had become used to with my father's lifestyle. Excuse me.
Did you have like a favorite place that you lived in? Like any place that's like memorable or like you enjoyed learning about the culture and the atmosphere in those areas?
I think there are two places that resonated really well with me. One was Texas, and it probably wasn't so much the place as it was the timeline. So it was, just before I was a teenager. So I was starting to, I think, really make more real connections with people, starting to build relationships, you get those first crushes as a kid and everything. So I think it was more developing emotionally as a youngster that makes that bond. And then of course my time in Germany. So the last duty station my dad had right before Texas or right after Texas was southern Germany down in it was Bamberg actually, and of course I continued to develop and go into my early teen years, and I don't know, I'm from a German background. My grandfather was actually in the military on the German side of the World War and came over to the States as from that, but so I had that connection to there, and we always lived off base. So we got to live amongst, I'll call it the people, they call it the economy, but I wasn't just exposed to just military American folks. I was actually exposed to the people out, in the German culture. And I grew up speaking the language. Like I said, my grandfather spoke German. So I grew up speaking German. So it made it easier to transition and get around in Europe as well. So, I mean, those two places really resonated with me a lot.
Growing up in those different cultures, would you say it helped you grow skills and that maybe some people may not have if they haven't been in those situations?
I don't know if it grew skills, but it certainly it brought me to have a level of appreciation of different types of people that are out there, right? You got the A types that are, I'm going after it. And you got the more laid back types, just, they're like, okay, it'll happen. But, then and inside of that, there's all these different kind of folks that resonate with different things. Some folks, and I'll speak in clinical terms, some people are more kinesthetic and some people are more visual, some people like red hair, some people like black hair. I mean, and there's all kinds of that. And there's, on the other side of that, there's all kinds of folks that have preconceived notions of people depending on, maybe they have black hair or red hair or they're kinesthetic or they're not, so you get exposed to a lot of that, traveling the States and traveling in general. So I think it made me aware of those so I could learn how to handle them or avoid them as necessary.
I think one of those things is like, I know for me, going to a college that was international based, I kind of learned a lot about how people interact with others from
Mm-hmm.
different cultures and what they do differently. And it kind of made me grow as a person where I can be fluent in other ways than the normal norms that I'm used to. And it keeps me growing as a person.
Absolutely.
Growing up with that, with your dad being in the military, did you kind of like that structure that he had, or was it kind of like you're getting away from it and you were able to be free in a way?
A little of both, actually. I think when my dad retired, I was in my just, I say 14, 15, so that mid-teen range, and finished high school in Southern California. So I went from this very structured environment to probably the most liberal place on the planet, let alone the United States. And I went from being the guy, the kid with the short hair and, the high water jeans to becoming a surfer, and just this pendulum swung almost all the way the other way. And it didn't happen overnight, but it started to happen. And for me, I think one of the things that actually started that was the school I ended up going to in Southern California was behind in curriculum from where I was when I got out of the military-based schools. And so I was relearning stuff I already knew, so I became very bored. I was always very good in school because I think it kept me engaged, right? It's like, this is interesting, let me go learn it. But here I was, being introduced to stuff. It's like, I learned this 2 years ago. Here's a great story. I figured I'm going to take an easy class. I'm going to take German. I already spoke German, right? And probably about the end of the first semester, I believe it was, I get a test and I got an F. No joke, I got an F in a language I could speak. Now, sure, we can get an F in English too, right? But so I went and I showed my dad the test, and he was looking at it, and the questions were in English, and you have to write the questions in German. And my dad goes, "Well, you got all the answers right." Well, so him and we go down, and, he goes to the teacher and he says, all right, these answers he wrote down here, I've been speaking this since I was a kid. My father came from the country. He's right. All the answers he wrote are right. Well, come to find out, the lady that was teaching the language couldn't speak it. She was just going from the book. And because what I wrote didn't match what was in the book, right, which was very, very structured, it was less conversational as it was, just more rigid, raw English rules. So she's like, well, it's wrong. He goes, no, it's not wrong. It's right. He goes, it doesn't say exactly what you said, but his answer is right. And, he went and explained it to her. So it was things like that that made me a little less, okay, I really liked the structure. And it started me, going away from school and hanging around with, a less than savory crowd as a result.
That is so interesting with how that your teacher and that, because
right,
one of the like Spanish, there's like so many different variations of Spanish depending on which country you're from. So
right,
like someone that could speak it, but it's not the way the book is, they would be wrong. And I'm like, how they speak that language, they know what the answers are and how they are.
exactly.
For us, it's like I'm not fluent in that language, but I'm trying to figure out from the book part. But that's so interesting that someone who is teaching that class doesn't know the language.
Doesn't know. Yeah, really weird. It was bizarre.
Yeah. Did you have any motivations or inspirations, like someone you looked up to?
I mean, other than my father, obviously my father was a huge inspiration for me. As I got into martial arts, Bruce Lee actually became an inspiration for me. And it was beyond just the movies. Obviously, given the fact I'm in my mid 50s, Bruce Lee would have been huge in my teenage years before he passed away. But, I went out beyond just the movies and started reading the things he had written, like Tao of Jeet Kune Do, the philosophies. And so that was like, all right, this is really cool. And I think that fed the structure that I needed. The martial arts kind of led that structure. There's a routine you go through to learn things and to graduate and get a belt and to move on and to move on. And so that became someone I looked up to. And I think beyond that, it was really just the male role models in my life would have been my father and my grandfather. My great grandma was a huge role model as well. She actually came out to Southern California on she was a child, obviously. She came out into California from Florence, Kansas on a covered wagon.
Oh,
Right. So we're going way back, and they got a plot of land in Southern California and literally built the home that she lived in that I would go and frequent and see her on. Poured I mean, they did it all from the raw thing, and then they tore that down and rebuilt it with more modern techniques later on in life. But she had that home for, gosh, I want to say it was 100+ years as it went on through the family, and it was really cool to engage with her and hear some of the stories. And I was being in my mid-teens, and she was in her, I want to say 70s, probably mid to early 70s. And we would always go, we lived in the same town, probably just on opposite sides, and we'd go over there every Sunday and play dominoes and have dinner and hang out. My aunt and uncle would be there. It was a cool family bonding moment. But listening to the stories of how things have changed since I was a kid, and this was what, late 70s, early 80s we're talking about here. So how much have things changed since then? What kind of stories have been changed? We pulled up one time, and she was up on the roof of the house. It was a single story structure, but still up on the roof of the house. She was putting down the tar, redoing the roof up there in her 70s.
wow.
I was like, you are awesome.
It's like a superwoman right there.
Right? Exactly.
Up on the roof and everything. So would you say from your childhood with the whole structure, do you still use the whole structure system nowadays?
I use it overall, absolutely. I'm still an early riser. My wife and I are usually up and about 3:30, 4 o'clock, Monday through Friday. We'll sleep in. And when I say sleep in, that's like another hour or so on the weekends. And, we go through our routines, get a little workout in, get the breakfast in, get a little reading in the mornings, and then, just start doing whatever tasks are at hand. So there's a lot of structure around that, but we keep the spontaneity in a structured format. It almost seems counterintuitive to say that. It's like we have a space where we're free to do things, and we'll throw something in there at random. But usually that at random is in advance. We're big concert goers. We love going. Obviously, we're not doing a lot of that right now, right? We love going to see live bands and festivals and stuff. So we keep a lot of a space open to a lot for that. And then when they announce it, then we throw it in there right away. And then the cool thing about that, well, you're there to go see probably a handful. If we talk about a festival that lasts 3 days, you're there to see a couple of the headliners, right? We have to go see these bands. But then there's so many new up and coming and random bands that you get to do that. So it kind of feeds both the structure and the spontaneity at the same time. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of routine that keeps me alive.
What was that dream job that you were wanting growing up? What were you wanting to pursue?
When I was younger, I went through a couple of phases, as most youngsters do. Being in Southern California, there was a period in my time when I wanted to be a stuntman, of all things, right? I wanted to be, you ever saw Hooper, the old, what was that, Burt Reynolds movie, where he was a stuntman in there. And I actually rode my bike from where I lived in Norwalk, California, into Los Angeles to go to the Stuntman's Association, I guess you'd call it hall. They had a place in there, and I kind of checked it out, and they're like, well, you got to get your SAC, your actor's card, and everything like that. So that was a little more struggle and a little more money than I had at the time. So the other thing I'd wanted back in those days was I wanted to be it was called a forensic pathologist, right? You're like a Quincy Jones. If you now, of course, I'm dating myself again. It was a television series on TV where basically a forensic pathologist is the guy that he'll do some of the autopsies and try to figure out what happened to somebody, right, when they pass away, right? Oh, why did you die? Of natural causes? Did someone, So that was always intriguing to me, that investigative piece of it. Unfortunately, I'm red-green colorblind, so the shading of tissues would have eluded me and would have been, probably a bad idea to, oh, okay, you're fine, and they're dying of something, right? So we don't want to be doing that. And so I just kind of embarked on the tech path as computers started to evolve. I actually joined the service right out of high school. And they let me be what I wanted to be. And I'm not saying that as a tagline, but when I was at the recruiter's office, he says, you got a choice. You can pick your first duty station, or you can pick your MOS, which is your job, right? Your occupational specialty. And I said, well, I want my first duty station to be Germany. I wanted to go back to Germany. I loved it so much. And he said, well, in that case, you get to pick your first duty station and your job, because no one wanted to go overseas back then. Everyone wanted to go to, Hawaii or Florida or somewhere like that. And I'm like, I'll go to Germany. Heck yeah. And I ended up being what they call a flagged records clerk, which is a really boring job. In the military, when you join, you get what's called a 201 file, and it's pretty much, it follows you through your entire military career, however short or long that may be, and everything that happens to you goes into this file. And back then, they were all physical files, and you carry them around with you. And if something bad happened to you, so if you got in trouble, your file would come to my desk, and I would make sure all the proper actions were taken as you went through whatever trouble you got into. If you were found innocent, okay, that's all good, right? But you nothing good could happen to you. You couldn't go on leave, you couldn't get a raise, you couldn't get a promotion. So all these things. So there's a very structure around that. Well, I took my love for computers, and I actually built my first computer from a kit in a magazine back then. And I took my job and I programmed it into this computer. I was learning visual. It was just basic back then, and because it was just tracking simple records. So I actually wrote a simple record tracking program that reminded me, okay, this person needs to do this on that date, and it would come up, and I'd go to the file and I'd do the thing, and I'd put in the new entry, and then it would go back into its cycle again. And that started me down the path of being a techno geek, learning computer programming. So when I got out of the military, I started that up as a freelance project in Southern California, doing database programming for insurance companies.
Did the military at that time not have anything programming wise, or were you kind of someone that was trying to?
I actually just stumbled on it, and they did have some things programming wise, but I didn't go back and to change my MOS at the time.
Would you say that you were kind of following in your dad's footsteps with going into the military, or this was like something that you've always wanted to do?
It was a bit of following in my dad's footsteps. I was, like I mentioned earlier, I had started hanging around with a less than savory crowd and just doing stupid stuff. I mean, beyond the usual teenage stupid stuff. And it was a good choice for me at the time, because it was like, all right, if I don't do this, I'm probably going to keep traveling down this awful path and make some bigger mistakes that could cost me time behind, bars and what have you. So I made the choice to go into the military to say, all right, I'm just going to get away from all this, go do my thing, and hopefully find something in the process. And if that was a career in the military, cool. If it wasn't, that's cool too.
So after the military, what was your next path that you were going towards?
Well, like I said, I came out of there, and I was following that computer programming piece, doing some computer programming for preferred provider organizations and insurance companies. And it was going pretty well. I mean, I actually wrote some programs for a doctor's billing facility, and for in a couple other places, and I was doing really well. I mean, this is just right before the dot-com boom. Really, everything started taking off big time. Computers were on the rise, and things were starting to happen. And I was cashing checks. I was doing okay, but again, I found myself reintroducing myself to questionable characters. And I'm just going to say it like this. I started partying too much. I started drinking too much, and I started doing drugs at the same time. And that really as it was like you first started, you're like, oh, this is nothing. Like you go out party once or twice, right? You go get drunk once or twice. You're like, okay, I'll just sleep it off. I'm good. But then you start doing more and more and more. It's like the drugs are the same way. Oh, I do that first line of coke, right? Oh, wow, that was awesome. Okay, and if that was it, you're cool, right? I tried it. It's all good. That wasn't the path I took. I started down a real dark road, and to sustain my habit, started selling and getting other people to sell as well. And for about 2-ish years or so, I stayed in that life pretty heavily. It was not a good scene. Unfortunately, I was good at it, and that made it a little too easy. It was way too enticing, right? Oh, I could do this. And, I had a couple of folks that were doing it with me, that I'll say underlings, so to speak. And so I could really just, I'll go buy it over here and you go sell it. I get the money and rinse and repeat, and I'm like, I don't know what everyone's complaining about. This is pretty easy stuff right here. And I was probably out one weekend doing probably about a 3-day party binge. Yeah, probably 3 days is an honest statement. It may have been 2, but you know what I'm saying. And I get back to my condo, and I see the door is kicked in, and I thought I had gotten robbed. Obviously, you hang out with these kind of characters, that kind of thing's going to happen. And when I get inside, it becomes obvious my place had been raided, right? The cops had kicked in the door to my house. I mean, and it was just like you see in the movies, the after effects, right? Furniture's flipped over, right? Things are thrown everywhere. Cereal and, mashed potato flakes are dumped out on the counters as they're looking for things. And I was looking around going, what the hell? Well, clearly, all the decisions I had made up to that point had gotten me a little bit too much attention. And I decided to change my path, and really probably not so much, and I say this in hindsight, obviously, because of myself. I think if it had just been me, I may have continued down that path. I don't know, right? But I had a 4-month-old daughter at the time. Luckily, she wasn't in the home when it happened, and I wasn't at the home when it happened. Otherwise, I might not be talking to you right now. I might be talking to you with like these things in front of me. But she was really a big motivator for me to say, okay, this is not a path I need to travel anymore. And luckily, with the help of my mom and dad and a gentleman I call my brother, he helped me. They all helped me get my act together. Clean up my act, clean up my body, and clean up my headset too. I mean, because really coming out of that, because of the caca I had been doing for a couple of years, it kind of eroded my my self-esteem to the public, right? To the general public, because that's not an accepted thing to be doing, right? And so I didn't go right back into computer programming. I mean, I needed to bring my my self-worth. It was really damaged. So I was doing day jobs, filing jobs, clerk jobs, working in a warehouse, just to feel good about myself and get back up on my feet again. So after probably about a year of that or so, I landed a good role with the Coca-Cola company, and that started my rise in the corporate America world. And that went from there to Home Depot. I've worked with Frontgate and David's Bridal and Victoria's Secrets. I mean, I've been lucky enough to work with some really great brands for long times and short times. I worked for Coke for 12 years and Home Depot for a couple of years, Frontgate 5 years. But in each one of them was able to glean something awesome that they're really good at. Marketing from Coca-Cola. If you're going to learn marketing, that's probably the place to go. They are a marketing machine. Long-winded answer.
No. Would you say having your daughter was it hard to be dealing with all those substances, but then coming home and seeing her and knowing that one day it could go badly and then I wouldn't be able to see her?
Back then, my mindset was so selfish. I didn't think about it that way. I was invincible. I was like, oh, this is easy. I got this down pat. I was the cliche stupid idiot that you see on some of those television shows that you're just sitting there going, you're about to go down, dude. You just don't get it yet. And yeah. I mean, yeah, I did not even think about it from that perspective of, there's this little life right there that I'm responsible for. I was thinking about from the point of I'm having fun, I'm doing good, I'm bringing in cash, and that's taking care of you, right? Which was a very selfish perspective. And obviously that door being kicked in, was a little eye-opening moment going, okay, wait a minute.
So working for those big companies, what's the one thing that you learned about yourself working for those companies?
I learned a couple of things. I think one of the things I learned early on was to find someone to learn from. So a lot of big companies, and it works for some people. I'm not always one of those folks. You can hide in a big company, right? You could be really, really good at your job. And I like to think I'm really good at the things I do. And so that gets you enough notice to give you, raises and promotions and so forth. But does it give you the attention that's like, I like attention. I'll get up in front of a stage of 5, 10, 1,500 people. I'm good. I'm right. Hey, give me the attention. And I think that taught me, one, find people to teach you more than just your job so that you're ready for the next thing, right? If you just learn your job, you can get really good and you can live a comfortable life, and that's for you, that's fine. One of the ladies, Angela, who was the personal assistant to our director for our division, I asked her, I said, how long have you been doing this? And at that time, she had been doing it 15 years. I'm like, 15 years, this same job, and she was really good at it. She knew her director inside and out. She was one of those cliche gals. He's like, would you? She's like, done, got it, you're good. And she's like, yeah, this is, I love to serve. Like, this is my happy spot right here. Then when I go home, I don't have to worry about this. I come in, do my job, I go home. I'm like, I get it. For me, that wouldn't work, right? I need that next step, that next challenge. So I learned to find someone that could teach me just outside my comfort zone so that when I got there, I wasn't totally in the dark and, panicking. I could actually step into it with a modicum of confidence. And then it was about teaching me something I had no idea about, right? So where I was at in Coca-Cola, we did North America marketing. So it wasn't the Coca-Cola bottler. We didn't make the product. We made all the advertising for the product. So pretty much if it had the Coca-Cola brand on it, it came through our shop, right? And so I was always learning, what is it people were clicking with? Why were we doing this thing? Why were we doing that thing? And then when I got to, like, for example, you go to a Home Depot, it's a completely different type of marketing, right? Because you're targeting a different person, right? You're going after the DIYer, right? You need to have what they need, and you need to be able to find it easy, and et cetera, and those types of things. So it's a different tactic. It's like, okay, I get that. That's cool. And then there I started working with the marketing folks and learning things like the metrics that they used on the websites and why you would throw it up and you'd bring it down. I'm like, oh, that's amazing. And start using that in my planning. And then I go to somewhere like a Front Gate who sells high-end furniture to folks. They targeted folks who had a home of $1.5 million or more. Right. So you're talking about people that will buy a $10,000 outdoor furniture set. Right. And that's what we sold. That's some of the things we sold. And so now you're marketing to a completely different person, but a lot of the tactics are the same, but there are a few things that you got to change. One of the things they introduced, which makes perfect sense once you think about it, but they weren't doing it at first, was a white glove service. So, hey, Mr. Rich Man, right? Mr. Well-to-do person, you just bought this $10,000, outdoor furniture set from us. We're happy to come in there and take your old furniture out for you and dispose of it. Bring your new furniture in, unpackage it, let you inspect it, set it all up for you, to arrange it the way you want it to, and then take all the packaging away, right? Okay, well, you're thinking, that makes perfect sense. Well, no one was offering it. So they started offering that service. Obviously, there's an upcharge that goes with it, right? You bought $10,000 worth of furniture. Yeah, a $500 upcharge for setup is nothing. They're like, please, I don't have to deal with it then. And so these little things, you're like, okay, that's a completely different way of thinking of things. And then they started a sister company where they would take the products that were proven from the from front gate side, and they would recreate them with step down materials. And over here, you've got the finest materials on the planet. Okay, $10,000.
Yeah.
Over here, all right, we're going to use materials that will last a few years. So they're still really good materials. But now, you can get it for $750. Night and day, or $1,200, right? Depending on the set. So it's the same concept, but now we're going to target a bigger market, because there's more folks out there that, your blue collar folks, the you and me's of the world, right? And so now you're taking those same kind of tactics and marketing to them, and offering them the same services, obviously at a different price, but now they're feeling like they're $1.5 million homeowner, because they're getting that, oh, wow, I saw this in that catalog. It was $10,000. This looks just like it, right? And so, and they're still getting the value for the money and everything. So it's all of that going in play. And then you go, when I worked at, say, at David's Bridal, now it's all about, okay, now it's, price shopping. Everyone's trying to get that great price. And, it's mass produced, but it's mass produced where everything looks unique, and they can do these quick little add-ons in the store. And then over here, we also have the designer lines, which are the step up prices, right? And so there's that nice mix of things. And you start learning about the nuances of, obviously apparel and dresses. And, why do you think that dress sold? Well, it could have been, it could have been the heart bust, or it could have been the fact that it was a mermaid or a princess and all these different things. And so now you're learning to dig in the data to find it, and then the different ways that they show their stuff on the website, and how people shop, and the time frames for shopping, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, everywhere I went, it was like I was just absorbing everything I could. It's like, okay, now if I stay here for a while, I can take all the stuff I've learned and the new stuff I'm learning and share it and be even better. And if I go somewhere else, now I need to grab all this and carry it with me.
Marketing is such a fascinating thing to learn about. And like,
isn't it?
When you were explaining like the different, because you were hitting different target markets with the people that you were targeting. Like Coca-Cola is for kind of an everyday person that likes soda. There's no specific types of person. But then you went to Home Depot, and now you got the DIY. But some of those people that like Coca-Cola are those DIY, so you're able to absorb that information.
Yeah.
I use the tools when you're with Home Depot, but you might have to change it up in a way. And it's so fascinating, like coming up with, like, just seeing on TV the different ads. Like, if you think Coca-Cola, the first thing I think of is the polar bear.
Yes.
Like, that's just like, I mean, they did their job, because now anytime I think of polar bears, you're going to think
Coca-Cola. See?
right away. And when they do the branding with the Olympics and having the rings on the bottles and stuff. And
oh yeah, we were actually, my team did the '96 Olympics in Atlanta. We did all of that, and it was an amazing thing to go through. It was a lot of fun. And even inside that, you think about Coca-Cola, the brand, the major brand. They also have Sprite. And then, they ended up buying Barks. So now they have a root beer, and each one of those, they target towards a demographic. So obviously Sprite is like a Coke, anyone could drink it, but they find it's very popular with a very certain demographic. And so they use that in their marketing. And then the same thing with when they were looking for a brand to buy, so they could be a little more edgy with their advertising and with some of their marketing. And they would never do that with their 110-year-old brand, the flagship brand. They wouldn't go out on the edge with Coke. So when they got they found Barks and bought it. Barks was already an edgy brand for a root beer soft drink, and so when they brought it on board, they really went after that. The whole Barks has bites commercials, and then they also did, if I remember, Surge back in the what was that, the 90s, I believe it was. There was a product there. It was a citrus product, and it was out for, I don't know, 3-4 years, and they did some really crazy advertising with that they would have never done with Coca-Cola, the main brand. They actually were able to go have some real fun with it.
You talked about wanting to find what's next, and I'm going through that same experience where you kind of learn everything, and then I'm always, what's next for me to learn? So I'm always reaching out and trying to ask my managers and directors, I'm like, can I learn about this part? Because to me, I love learning, and it
Yeah.
just helps, because if maybe there's that future job where you have that experience and that knowledge, it works perfectly.
Yeah.
So I'm always learning, and even when I'm doing these interviews, I learn something new about what I could implement in my life, or a different way of thinking about certain things, and
Absolutely.
going from there. What would you say was the biggest challenge that you found working with those big brands?
Idea implementation is probably the biggest ones. The bigger the boat, the longer it takes to turn. So, I mean, if I think back, probably Coca-Cola would have been the one that was the most challenging. But I was lucky enough, in the director that was over my team allowed me to be very. She gave me a wide berth, you could say, right? So there was a lot of things. I mean, we had a number of major brands that we serviced. You know, we're talking about the McDonald's and the Wendy's and the BKs of the world. And, we had to be as nimble as possible, which mean we had to watch our inventory positions. But with an ever-changing brand and an ever-changing marketplace, right? You could come up with an idea and someone, oh, go print 1,000 of those and you sell 5. Well, what are we going to do with the rest of these, right? And it's just not an endless amount of money out there. So you got to figure out ways to move through that inventory, and how to get that out into the marketplace effectively and efficiently. And so I came up with a few ideas, and it was like, you go up to and service through committee. Oh, here's the idea. Here's the pros. Here's the cons. Here's the you do the little executive summary. You write the whole report. You're like, oh God, just stick a needle in my eye. By the time I can get through this committee, I could have solved this problem, right? And actually went to my director at one point. And says, look, here's the solution right here, A, B, C. There is really no con. The only con to this is I need to go to these teams and say, look, I'm going to tack on an extra 2% onto the budget that you apply to us to get this product from us. And they're going to say, why 2%? And I'm saying, well, because you're using 5% in obsolete, or 5% in obsolete inventory. So I'm willing to eat over half of that, but you're going to pay for this. And I think the real benefit of that is now you're going to be watching it, because if I'm taking 2% of your budget, your marketing budget, and I'm just going to put it into a slush fund to write stuff down or write it off when you're like, okay, I'm out of here. Then you're going to be a little more mindful. That was the only con, was I had to go get them to agree to that. And I was able to do that. She goes like, if you can get them all to sign up to do that, let's make it happen. I just gave you carte blanche, go make it happen. And so it took me about a month to go, meet with all the folks that, that were in charge, that had the fiduciary responsibility, saying, hey, here's what we're going to do. Bing, bang, boom. Here's the problem. Here's the solution. Everyone's happy. I'll take the responsibility out of your hand. I will manage it. We'll get it handled. And they're like, oh, sure. And I guess the cool thing about it was, instead of telling them, yeah, it's going to cost you 2% of your budget, it was more of I'm going to take this away from you, the responsibility of having to deal with this obsolete. Give that to me, and give me that 2% for doing that. And you're free to do the rest of the stuff that you're really good at, which is creating the stuff for your BK customer, your McDonald's customer. And they're like, oh, please do that. They're willing to take that off, because I already knew how I could get rid of it. I know I can move the product. I had the solutions. They didn't have the solutions. They're like, what do we do with this? That was probably the biggest challenge, was finding the right people to help you make those decisions in the time that you want it. You're like, we could solve so much with this if we would just do it. And you're like, no, we've got a process. And obviously, given the fact that I came from the military environment, I understand the structure and the process. But there's a time when you're saying, okay, dude, doing it just to do it, it's kind of stupid, right? When you can just say, you have the responsibility on your side, I have the responsibility on my side. Do we agree? Cool, done, moving on, right?
So during this time, you mentioned that you had that time frame where you were going through the substances and the
For
drugs and alcohol. Was everything being good for you personally, or was there any more things coming up or a relapse in a way?
Luckily, I never relapsed on the drug side of things. Knock on wood. I stayed clean and sober the rest of my life. Did I stumble? Yeah. There was a couple of times, right coming right out of it, I did stumble, but it never took me back. And I can honestly say for the past 40 years, have never touched one. Anything other than what the doctor has said I should have. um, but yeah, I did have a couple of more big events that made me kind of gave me a reality check. During the peak of my Coca-Cola career, my second daughter was born, and when she was in the womb, one of her arteries didn't fully develop, and this artery was feeding her intestinal tract. So when she was born with like 20 centimeters of small intestine versus the 200 she should have been born with. So she didn't have enough small intestine to absorb nutrition orally. And so for the first 3 months of her life, she went through 6 major operations as they tried different things to try and fix the issue. I mean, one of the things they tried is they took the intestine, and because the small intestine has so many veins and arteries to absorb the nutrition, they had to cut it, like a jigsaw puzzle. And what they tried to do is like put it together and put it end to end to try and double what she had, in the hopes that would give her enough to sustain at least while she grew it, and it would grow longer. And the operation was successful, but it didn't give her enough surface. So across the course of those 6 operations, they finally got her stabilized. One of the operations was to put in what's called a TPN line, a total parental nutrition line, which is basically a bag of the raw nutrients that comes from an IV bag straight into an artery right above her heart. It would dump in there, and then her heart would pump it through her body. Now, the body, being the amazing thing that it is, says, okay, well, I don't need to filter this stuff. And what does our liver do? Our liver filters stuff. Oh, I don't need this liver, so her liver starts to deteriorate. Now she needs a liver and a small bowel transplant. So they get her stabilized, and we finally get her on the list. And you're going through life, and as a parent at that point, all you can do is wait and hope. This is back in the beeper days. They gave us a beeper, and they say, if this beeper goes off, grab the bags that you'll already have ready and get to the children's hospital, because organs have become available, and we're gonna do everything happens fast. And I'm like, okay, cool. And we had one time that beeper went off, and we had our bags, or it's like when if your wife is pregnant, right? You've got that bag at the ready. So you're grabbing the bag and you throw it. And I think I broke every land speed record on. I had an IROC Z at the time, so it was really easy to do. Getting there. And unfortunately, the organs that caused the beeper to go off were not viable. Unfortunately, the child who would have been donating the organs had been beaten, and the organs were damaged. So double whammy there. So after this call, the doctors realized that between everything, Krista really needed to be closer to the hospital. And when I say the hospital, we were in Atlanta working for Coca-Cola. The best hospital for this particular operation was in Pittsburgh. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So now Mom and Krista move up to Pittsburgh, and they're in the Ronald McDonald House right across the street from the Children's Hospital. A great facility, right? Anyone ever worries about that? Ronald McDonald's houses are awesome. And so now we're still waiting and still hoping. And, so going up, me and my oldest daughter going up there every weekend or so, visiting and seeing things. And about 17 months in, Krista takes a really turn for the worse. Her health just drops. She had an accident. One of the nurses, dropped her. I hate to say this, right? Literally dropped her, and she landed on her head, and she had this huge hematoma. So now her body, who's already weak, is struggling just to heal this hematoma on her head. And in the meantime, everything else starts to deteriorate even more, and she goes, almost unconscious. and they move her into a regular room down to ICU, and it's like a couple of weekends of that. It's like, when you're a parent, and anyone who is a parent that may be listening will understand what I'm about to say. When you look at your child, you can look at your child and know that something's wrong. There's something about the way they're carrying themselves. There's something, maybe it's that, father-daughter connection, that parent-child relationship. You just know. And I went up there one weekend, and I walked into the room, and I walked in and I knew something was wrong. And obviously there was something wrong. I'm telling you the story, right? But there was something even more wrong. And so I pulled the doctor aside and I asked, if the organs were available right now, would she survive the operation? And I got a bunch of doctors speaking, him and haw, and I literally, no joke, grabbed him, pulled him into a janitor's closet and closed the door, and look, it's just you and me, man, right? No hospital administrators, no insurance companies, just a couple of guys. And finally told me, no, I don't think she would survive right now. And so, not the answer I wanted, obviously, but I knew, okay, now I've got a baseline. So do you think her health will improve to the point where she could survive the operation? Given all the challenges that she had faced and everything her body had gone through, he finally told me he didn't believe so. So now the choice becomes, do we leave her on the machines that are not right this moment keeping her alive, and hope for the best, do the prayers and what have you, or disconnect? And this is a personal opinion, a personal choice for anyone who's going through anything like this. And I respect whatever choice they would make. But for me, it felt like if I was keeping her here, it would be for me, not for her, right? It would have been selfish. And like I said, that's almost how I felt way back in my dark drug days. I was selfish, right? It was all about me and the partying and everything. So I didn't want to swing that pendulum so far that way that I was going to be selfish and keep her in her pain for my selfishness, right? So opted to disconnect her. And this is a literal statement. They put her up in swaddling cloth and her favorite blanket. And I sat down in a rocking chair in her ER room and I rocked her to sleep one last time. And she literally, went to sleep that last time as I rocked her. And it's, sorry, a little wispy-eyed there. It's a horrible thing to go through, but I was blessed to have gone through it the way that I did, because I could tell her goodbye and I could tell her thank you for all the things you taught me in her short time here. I mean, she taught me so many amazing things about looking at life through a new set of eyes, looking at life a little bit differently, greeting the world every day with a smile. She had this cool thing. Have you ever seen the movie E.T., where E.T. actually used his finger and it was all glowing and he would touch and heal? Well, whenever she saw something new that she hadn't encountered before, be it a dog, a cat, a stuffed animal, a piece of food, she would reach that finger out real slow and tentative and touch it, right? And once she touched it, knew it was okay, she'd grab it and it's in her mouth, or she's playing with it or whatever, and just to watch her on those days when I knew she had to be in pain given what she was going through and what had happened to her on any given day. But she still had this big, bright-eyed, blue-eyed, bright, beautiful smile on her face, and and a wave for anyone who greeted her. And so those were the lessons I took from all of that, right? Appreciate every day you have with anyone that you love or care about. And people come into your life and exit your life for whatever reason, for a reason, right? Whether they're here for 30 seconds, 30 years, or 300 years, right? They're here in your life. You guys have crossed paths. You and I, Alex, have crossed paths for a reason, right? And it may be just so I can hear a piece of your story and you can hear a piece of mine, or there's something I'm going to learn from you or something you're going to learn from me, right? If we don't take advantage of those lessons, well, shame on us, right? Yeah. So I was telling her, thank you for that. That was, turning point number 2 for me.
So talk about how Dark Horse Schooling came upon.
Dark Horse Schooling came upon. I had started a podcast probably about 4 years ago that went for about 2 years. And really it was, It was a mouthpiece for my personal development journey. So coming out of Krista's passing, I threw myself into my work, which was a good thing. But to keep my head set right? Because you could throw yourself into work and still be all jacked up in the head. I threw myself also into personal development. And back then it was all about Zig Ziglar and, Jim Rohn, and Anthony Robbins was coming up at the time, and Tamara Jones, and a host of other ones. I threw myself into all their body of work, their, conferences and get-togethers, and was lucky enough to meet a couple of them. And so this podcast a few years ago was kind of, it was going through, turning point number 3, and it was the mouthpiece of me sharing that personal development journey, right? How to keep your head set right. And it did pretty good. The format was just me getting on the microphone and sharing whatever was on my mind that day, right? And I did it 5 days a week for a couple of years. And then what was going on in my world, I didn't feel aligned with being able to share that. I didn't feel, I almost had this imposter syndrome, right? I got shit going on in my world right now that if people looked at me and saw what was going on in my world, it was just a wicked divorce and all that kind of noise. They'd be like, well, who are you to get up here and tell me how to be happy and how to, set goals when you can't even manage that? So I stepped aside. And recently, I'm in a good spot, and I'm like, I'm gonna pick this back up. But rather than just do all personal development, I wanted to share some of the, business journey, right? And really more for the entrepreneurs. And because I always felt like there's so many folks that feel like they're the dark horse. And for me, a dark horse is someone who could win the race, right? They get up there on the track, they've got the skill set, right? It may not be a fine-tuned engine yet, but they've got something inside them, and that starting gate's open, right? And there are people either holding them back, or they've locked the gates, or tripped them as they come out. But if you just let them run their race, they could win. So hence the Dark Horse Entrepreneur Podcast and Dark Horse Schooling, because I wanted to, start, building. There's a course I'm getting ready to come out with, and I do coaching, based on what I call the 6 C's of life.
I actually like that whole term dark horse, because you hear it in like sports a lot, like someone dark horse, like they're there, they have the skills, but they haven't had that moment to shine in a way.
Right.
And when they get that opportunity, it kind of is like they showcase it, and people are like, wow,
yeah,
I didn't think he was going to do that. And it's kind of it's one of those terms, like with my show, we use the phoenix as our logo, and where a phoenix rises, and it's kind of like a rebirth, or like showcasing the new journey that you're going on. A dark horse is, you have those skills, but you're ready to showcase it to the world.
Right. So Absolutely right.
So what does the future look like for you professionally and personally? What are you wanting to accomplish in the next few years?
I think for me, I want to, level up my coaching, right? I'd like to I got a couple of spots open. I want to get some more folks into the fold, so to speak. And like I said, I got a product and get ready to launch out. I got like 3 more product ideas in the back of my head that not necessarily would spin off of this, but certainly they would all work well together. So kind of a host of suite of products, and they would really be geared towards that entrepreneur. And, I think the COVID experience that we've all, had to go through of late kind of opened the doors a little wider than normally, because so many people are like turning to the online space right now. Like, oh, wow. Everyone was doing online stuff already, but now with COVID, everyone's like, okay, I might want to up my game a little bit. And I think there's opportunities for everyone out there that has some sort of skill set. And when I say skill set, it could be you're good with your hands, doing something, even mechanic-y, tactile, or it could be you've got some stuff up here that other people would pay to learn, right? And I think, and I'm an honest believer that everybody has something inside them that they that others would benefit from them sharing it with them. And whether they pay for it or just get it for free, giving them the tools to do that through some coaching or through some, some of these types of products would definitely make me feel real good about it.
So based on your journey, the last question I want to ask you,
Sure.
what tips or advice would you give someone listening to this interview to overcome their obstacles, to overcome their challenges, and rise to their challenge?
I think probably it'll be two parts. I think the first thing is get out of your head. And so many times people talk to themselves worse than they would let anyone else talk to them, right? Often I hear my own voice inside my head speaking to me in a way that I would smack someone upside the head if they would talk to me like that. So, you got to get out of your head and look at things objectively. Like I said, I truly believe everyone has that skill. So find that skill inside you to get it out. And then the next one after that is to find someone that is either a day, a week, a month, a year, a decade ahead of you along the path that you want to travel, and walk up to and say, hey, can I pick your brain for a minute? Take them out for a coffee, interview them on a podcast, right? You'd be amazed. And like I mentioned earlier, I've been lucky enough to have a number of these folks come in and out of my life. And most of the time, and I say most of the time, it's probably about 8 times out of 10, it's because I just walked up and asked them, hey, I really admire you in X arena. Could I pick your brain? Go to lunch, have a cup of coffee, sit down. Actually, I joined a Toastmasters group because I knew a number, 2 or 3 of the guys whose brains I wanted to pick were in that group, right? In the Coca-Cola company. I'm like, well, okay, I can grow my speaking skills at the same time and, build a relationship with these guys at the same time. And then it's just a natural conversation. Say, dude, I know you're doing this over here in the marketing department. Can I ask you a couple of questions? And people are very willing to share that kind of information, and then, as long as you don't abuse it. And then at a point, maybe it's, you make the relationship official. If it's a, organization, you can make it a mentor type of thing, or, hey, dude, let me just pay you to coach me. Let's just get on the phone an hour a week or an hour every couple of weeks. And you just, make me accountable, give me more advice, make sure I'm not going down the wrong road, because I've tripped and stumbled and fumbled and face planted a number of times, way too many, right? And I would have done it a lot more if I hadn't had those folks saying, dude, don't go that way. And if you go that way, watch out for this, that, and the other thing. And you're like, oh, there's that thing you told me about. And you can step aside and get back on track. Those are the two big ones is believe in yourself, get out of your head, right? And then find someone that could help you. And like I said, they don't need to be, a millionaire, right? They just need to be a day, a week, a month, a year ahead of you, and you can learn from them. And then that often motivates them down their path because they want to teach you more. And one of the big things I learned, oh gosh, I forget who it was that said it. It was learn, do, teach, right? So you learn the task, you do the task, and then you teach the task. Well, if you teach the task, you learn the task all over again, almost like at a different angle. So if I was going to give a third step, that would be the third step. All right, if you want to rise out of the ashes, help someone else in the process, right? So when you're helping someone else, you're out of your head then because you're worried about that. Hey, Alex, how's it going, man? How can I help you out? I hear you're having to struggle in this. When I went through a very similar example, here's what I did, right? You're not thinking about all this shit going on in your head at moments like that. You're worried about how to give to the person you're helping. So get out of your head, find a mentor, and be a mentor to someone else.
It's all about like being a mentor, helping that future generation in a way. Like
absolutely.
When I get asked, I was huge with event planning in college, and I did it for 3 years. I did huge results that school has not done since I've left. And I get emails all the time. Hey, can you read this event proposal that I have?
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoy it because I'm able to help give my opinions on it. But if they take it, they take it, but I want to help them any way I can. So I
Absolutely.
enjoy doing that. And with this podcast, we're not telling people how to live their life.
Absolutely.
We're all about telling people that maybe is going through something similar and maybe a different way of looking at it, or maybe different strategies that has helped us become better or have helped us grow in the similar situation that we've been in.
Yeah, absolutely. If I go back to one of the earliest lessons that still stick with my head, I'm gonna go all the way back to that book I mentioned of Bruce Lee, The Tao of Jeet Kune Do. One of the things he wrote in there that I still believe in to this day, and this is 50 years later, right? Was absorb what is useful and discard the rest.
Yeah.
So to your point, as there folks are listening to this show or any other show offering advice, offering assistance, absorb what's useful, discard the rest. If you hear one nugget out of this, right, take it with you, go do something with it. And then I think on the other side of that is, and then once you do something with that and you step forward in your life and your business or what your relationships or whatever, well, come back and review it later on. Maybe you'll find a new nugget. Right?
Yep. Well, Tracy, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and talking to us about your rise to the challenge. We definitely have learned a lot, and we're excited to see what the future looks like for you.
I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for having me, Alex.